When we think of ancient Rome, what comes to mind? Is it the disciplined legions marching in perfect formation, the brilliant generals and powerful emperors, or the magnificent monuments that still stand today? For centuries, Rome projected an image of itself as the ultimate civilizing force, bringing law, order, and progress to a barbarian world. It was the empire of victory, the greatest the world had ever seen. But beneath this shining veneer of glory lies a much darker, more brutal truth. The story of Rome isn't just about conquest. It's about annihilation. When the Roman war machine rolled over a kingdom, it didn't just defeat an army. It systematically erased a people's culture, their history, and their very identity. And at the heart of this brutal process was a fate reserved for the most powerful women of the conquered lands, their queens. For a captured queen, death on the battlefield would have been a mercy. Instead, they were subjected to something far more terrifying. A fate many historians argue was worse than execution. These women were not just prisoners of war. They were rulers, mothers, and living symbols of their nations. In Roman hands, they became something else entirely. Props in a grand and cruel spectacle of power. This is the story of what Rome did to the queens it captured, and how it used their humiliation to forge its own legend. To understand why the fate of these queens was so dreadful, we first need to understand the Roman triumph. A triumph wasn't just a victory parade. It was the highest honor a Roman general could receive, a religious and civic ceremony so spectacular it would be talked about for generations. It was a day-long procession through the streets of Rome, showcasing the spoils of war to the cheering mass. There were wagon loads of gold, priceless artworks, and exotic animals from the conquered lands. But the most valuable prize, the centerpiece of the entire spectacle, was the defeated royal family. Imagine the scene. The victorious general, the asterisk, triumphant or asterisk, rides in a golden chariot. His face, painted red to look like Jupiter, the king of the gods. The crowds are ecstatic, throwing flowers and shouting his name, and walking in chains before his chariot are the captured enemies, soldiers, nobles, and at the very front, the defeated king and his family. The queen, stripped of her royal robes and forced to walk in rags, is paraded through the very city that destroyed her home. This wasn't just about showing off a prisoner. It was a calculated act of psychological warfare. For the Roman people, seeing a foreign queen in chains was the ultimate proof of Rome's superiority. It reinforced the idea that Rome was destined to rule, that all other nations were inferior and deserved to be conquered. The queen's humiliation was their entertainment, her suffering a testament to their power. She was no longer a person. She was an object, a living trophy meant to embody the complete and utter subjugation of her people. The message was clear. Resist Rome, and this is what will happen to your leaders, your culture, your women. Let's look at one of the most famous examples, Zenobia, the warrior queen of Palmyra. In the 3rd century AD, Zenobia carved out a vast empire for herself in the East, challenging Rome's dominance. She was brilliant, cultured, and a formidable military leader who commanded immense respect. For a time, it seemed she might actually succeed. But then, the Emperor Aurelian marched east. After a series of hard-fought battles, Palmyra fell, and Zenobia was captured. What happened next became legendary. According to some sources, Aurelian celebrated his triumph in 274 AD, with Zenobia as his star attraction. They say she was bound in chains of solid gold, so heavily adorned with jewels that she could barely walk. She was forced to march through the streets of Rome, the once proud queen of the East, now a spectacle for the mob. This image of Zenobia, the powerful ruler brought low, became a powerful symbol of Roman might. It sent a chilling message to any other ruler who dared to defy the empire. While some historical accounts differ on the exact details, the core of the story remains a powerful illustration of Roman practice. Whether she was literally in gold chains or simply a prisoner in the procession, her presence served the same purpose: to turn a human being into a political statement. Another powerful story is that of Boudica, the queen of the Iceni tribe in Britain. After the Romans betrayed a treaty and publicly flogged her and assaulted her daughters, Boudica led a massive rebellion that nearly drove the Romans out of Britain entirely. She burned Roman cities to the ground and inflicted devastating defeats on their legions. She became a figure of pure terror for the Romans. In the end, however, her rebellion was crushed. knowing what awaited her if captured the chains, the parade, the public humiliation. Boudica chose to take her own life. She understood that capture was not survival. It was a fate worse than death. A final, lasting degradation that she refused to endure. Her choice tells us everything we need to know about what it meant to be a queen in Roman hands. So what happened to these women after the triumph? Their journey didn't necessarily end with the parade. The captured king, or male leader, was often taken to the Tullianum, a grim underground prison, and ritually strangled. As the grand finale of the general's triumph, it was a public execution to cap off the celebration. For the queens, the path was often different, but no less cruel. Some, like Zenobia, were reportedly given a comfortable retirement in a villa outside Rome. On the surface, this sounds merciful, but think about what it really meant. She would live out her days as a permanent exile, a curiosity for the Roman aristocracy. She would be forever known, not as the queen who built an empire, but as the queen Rome defeated. Her children would be raised as Romans, their heritage erased. Her name would be a footnote in Rome's story of greatness. This mercy was a form of cultural death, a slow erasure of her identity and legacy. For others, the fate was darker. We have fewer records, but it's easy to imagine what could happen to a powerless, high-value woman in a society where slavery was commonplace. They could be sold, given as political gifts, or simply disappear into the vast, anonymous underbelly of the Roman world. Their royal status meant nothing once they had served their purpose in the triumph. This Roman strategy of public humiliation was incredibly effective. It wasn't just about punishment. It was about narrative control. By parading these powerful women, Rome wasn't just celebrating a military victory. It was rewriting history in real time. It transformed formidable opponents into pathetic figures, turning their strength into a source of Roman pride. The queen, who once embodied her nation's sovereignty, was made to embody its defeat. The story of the captured queens is a stark reminder that the history written by the victors often hides the deepest wounds. Rome's legacy of law, architecture, and literature is undeniable, but so is its legacy of calculated cruelty. The empire wasn't just built on stone and strategy. It was built on broken lives and shattered identities. The fate of these queens shows us the true price of Roman glory, a price paid not just in blood on the battlefield, but in the slow, soul-crushing humiliation of those who dared to stand in its way. Their stories are a vital part of history, forcing us to look beyond the triumphant arches and see the human cost of empire. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this story compelling, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more hidden histories. Let us know in the comments what you think about this aspect of Roman history. We'll see you in the next video. What really happened to the queens who dared to defy Rome? To understand their fate, we have to grasp what victory meant to the Romans. For Rome, a battle wasn't won just by killing soldiers on the field. True victory was about total domination physically, mentally, and symbolically. It was about breaking the enemy's spirit completely. Think about it. Anyone can kill an enemy leader. But for Rome, a quick death was too merciful. It was far more powerful, far more lasting, to humiliate them. The Romans were masters of psychological warfare. They built their empire not just on legions and swords, but on fear. And fear was a weapon they sharpened with every victory. So, when a queen was captured, she wasn't just another prisoner of war. She became a living, breathing symbol. She was a message sent to every corner of the known world. Her suffering, her public degradation, was a carefully orchestrated spectacle designed to broadcast a single, chilling warning. This is what happens when you challenge the might of Rome. One of the most famous examples is Zenobia, the warrior queen of Palmyra. In the 3rd century AD, she carved out a massive empire for herself, seizing control of Egypt and much of the Near East. She was brilliant, powerful, and a direct threat to Roman authority. When the Emperor Aurelian finally defeated her, he didn't just execute her. That would have been too simple. Instead, he brought her back to Rome for his triumph. A Roman triumph was the ultimate victory parade, a lavish spectacle celebrating a general's success. Imagine the scene. The streets of Rome packed with cheering crowds, soldiers marching, spoils of war on display. And at the heart of it all, chained in gold, was Queen Zenobia. Accounts say she was so weighed down with jewels and golden chains that she could barely walk. She was forced to parade through the city, the once proud ruler now a public spectacle of defeat. This wasn't just about punishing Zenobia. It was a performance for the entire empire. Every senator, every merchant, every slave who saw her that day understood the message. Every province that heard the story knew what awaited them if they considered rebellion. Zenobia's humiliation was a lesson in Roman power, more effective than any speech or decree. It said, no matter how high you rise, Rome can bring you low. Another powerful story is that of Cleopatra. After her defeat alongside Mark Antony, she knew what awaited her. She knew she would be paraded through Rome, a trophy for her rival, Octavian. For a queen who saw herself as a living goddess, this was a fate worse than death. Her decision to take her own life was not an act of despair, but her final act of defiance. By choosing her own end, she denied Octavian his ultimate prize. She refused to become a symbol of his victory. This shows just how terrifying the prospect of a Roman triumph was for a defeated ruler. The same fate awaited countless other leaders. The Gallic chieftain Vercingetorix, who united the tribes of Gaul against Julius Caesar, was held in a Roman prison for 6 years. He was kept alive for one reason: to be the star attraction in Caesar's triumph. After being paraded through the streets in chains, he was publicly executed. His long, miserable wait was part of the punishment, a slow grinding down of his spirit before the final public display. It wasn't just queens and kings. Their children were often taken to Rome as well. The children of Cleopatra and Mark Antony, for instance, were paraded in her stead. This served a dual purpose. First, it was a symbolic continuation of the family's humiliation. Second, these royal children were often raised in Rome, educated as Romans. They were hostages, but they were also tools of assimilation. By Romanizing the next generation of a potential rival dynasty, Rome could absorb a threat and turn it into an asset. Some of these children were even married off to Roman allies, further weaving them into the fabric of the empire. But why go to such elaborate lengths? Why not just execute them on the battlefield? Because for Rome, the story of the victory was as important as the victory itself. The empire was vast and diverse, held together by a network of roads, laws, and legions. But the glue that truly bound it was the idea of Roman invincibility. This idea needed to be constantly reinforced. The public humiliation of a captured queen was a powerful piece of propaganda. It was theater on a grand scale. When a Celtic queen from the misty forests of Britain or a Nubian queen from the deserts of Africa was paraded through the heart of the civilized world, it reinforced the Roman sense of superiority. It showed the Roman people that their world order was the correct one, that their destiny was to rule. And for the conquered peoples, the message was equally clear. It was a demonstration of futility. It told them that resistance was not only deadly but would lead to the ultimate dishonor. Your gods, your traditions, your royal blood, none of it would save you from Roman chains. This fear was a crucial tool for maintaining stability in a sprawling empire that was always simmering with potential unrest. The fate of these queens also reveals a particular Roman view of powerful women. Women like Boudica of the Iceni, who led a massive rebellion in Britain, or Zenobia, were seen as unnatural. They had stepped outside their perceived gender roles. Their defeat and subsequent humiliation were, in a way, a restoration of what the Romans saw as the natural order. Parading a powerful queen in chains wasn't just about defeating an enemy. It was about putting a woman back in her place. So, what ultimately happened to these women after the parade? It varied. Some, like Vercingetorix, were executed. Others, like Zenobia, were given a more merciful fate. After her triumph, she was reportedly given a villa in Tivoli, where she lived out the rest of her days as a Roman noblewoman. Her children married into the Roman aristocracy. This might seem like a comfortable retirement, but make no mistake, it was another form of victory for Rome. They had not just defeated her, they had absorbed her. The once great enemy of Rome was now a Roman citizen, her lineage blending into the very empire she once fought. Her threat was completely neutralized. In the end, the story of captured queens is a story about the mechanics of empire. It shows us that power isn't just about armies and wealth. It's also about narrative, symbolism, and the control of fear. Rome mastered the art of political theater, and these unfortunate women were the unwilling stars of their most terrifying productions. Their personal tragedies were transformed into public lessons, their chains a reminder to the world of the price of ambition when faced with the unyielding power of Rome. It is an agreement, fascinating part of history that reminds us that empires are built not just with bricks and mortars, but with fear and spectacle. The ghosts of these queens still haunt the ruins of Rome, whispering a timeless story of power, defiance, and defeat. Thanks for watching. If you found this journey into Roman history interesting, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next exploration of the past. See you next time. Did you know that some of history's most powerful women ended their reigns in chains? Today, we're uncovering the dramatic stories of captured queens, rulers who defied empires and paid the ultimate price. From the misty hills of Europe to the sun-scorched deserts of Africa and the ancient lands of the East, these women weren't just royal figures. They were warriors, diplomats, and symbols of resistance. Their tales are a potent mix of courage, betrayal, and the unyielding quest for power. Let's travel back to ancient Britain, a land of fierce tribes and mystical druids on the very edge of the Roman Empire. This is the domain of the Iceni tribe and their formidable Queen Boudica. Picture this: a tall, imposing woman with fiery red hair cascading down her back, a piercing gaze, and a voice that could command armies. Boudica wasn't born to rule alone. She was the wife of King Prusutagus, a client king of Rome. He believed that by naming the Roman emperor co-heir in his will, alongside his daughters, he would protect his family and his kingdom. He was tragically mistaken. Upon his death, around 60 AD, the Romans saw an opportunity, not for partnership, but for plunder. They ignored his will, annexed his kingdom, and treated the Iceni as conquered subjects. When Boudica protested, she was publicly flogged, and her daughters were brutally assaulted. It was a humiliating and deeply personal attack, designed to break her spirit, but it did the opposite. It ignited a firestorm of vengeance that would sweep across Roman Britain. Boudica rallied the Iceni and neighboring tribes, who were also chafing under Roman oppression. Her fury was contagious. She transformed from a queen consort into a warrior queen, a symbol of Celtic defiance against the mightiest empire in the world. Leading a massive rebel army, she descended upon the heart of Roman power in Britain. Her first target was Camulodunum, modern-day Colchester, a city filled with retired Roman soldiers. The city was sacked and burned to the ground. Next, her war machine rolled towards Londinium, a bustling commercial hub. It too was razed, its inhabitants slaughtered. The same fate befell Verulamium, now St. Alban. In a short, brutal campaign, Boudica's forces had annihilated 3 key Roman cities and killed an estimated 70,000 to 80,000 people. Rome was shaken. For a moment, it seemed like the Celts might actually drive the Romans out of Britain, but the Roman governor, Gaius Suetonius Paulinus, was a seasoned general. He gathered his legions and chose his battlefield carefully, a place with a narrow front and a forest to protect his rear. Though vastly outnumbered, the disciplined Roman infantry stood firm against the chaotic charge of Boudica's tribal warriors. The battle was a massacre. The Roman legions systematically cut down the Britons, whose escape was blocked by their own supply wagons. Roman sources claim 80,000 Britons died, with minimal Roman losses. Boudica's rebellion was crushed. As for the queen herself, her fate is shrouded in mystery. The historian Tacitus says she poisoned herself to avoid capture. A warrior to the end, she chose death over the humiliation of being paraded through the streets of Rome in a triumph. Boudica was defeated, but her legacy as a symbol of freedom and resistance has endured for 2,000 years. Now, let's journey south, across the Mediterranean, to the sun-drenched lands of North Africa, to the ancient kingdom of Numidia. Here we meet another queen whose story is intertwined with Rome's expansion. Saphonisba. She was not a warrior queen like Boudica, but her influence was just as potent. Saphonisba was a Carthaginian noblewoman, daughter of the general Hasdrubal Gisco, a key figure in the Second Punic War. Renowned for her beauty and education, she was a political powerhouse in her own right. Originally, she was betrothed to Massinissa, a prince of an eastern Numidian tribe. However, politics intervened. To forge a powerful alliance against Rome, her father married her off to Sephox, king of the more powerful western Numidian tribe. Saphonisba's influence over her new husband was immense. She persuaded Sephox to break his alliance with Rome and side firmly with Carthage. This was a major strategic coup. For a time, the combined forces of Sephox and the Carthaginians held the Romans at bay in North Africa, but the tide of war turned. The brilliant Roman general Scipio Africanus, along with his Numidian ally none other than Sophonisba's spurned fiancé, defeated Sephox and the Carthaginians. Sephox was captured, and his capital city, Cirta, fell to Massinissa. When Massinissa entered the palace, he came face to face with Sophonisba. She fell at his feet, pleading not to be handed over to the Romans. She knew that as a captive, she would be paraded in Scipio's triumph in Rome, a fate she considered worse than death. Massinissa, still captivated by her, was moved. In a rash and romantic gesture, he married her on the spot, believing that as his wife, she would be protected from the Romans. But he underestimated Roman resolve. When Scipio learned of the marriage, he was furious. He reminded Massinissa that Sophonisba was a Roman captive, property of the state, and her influence had turned not one, but two kings against Rome. He demanded she be surrendered. Massinissa was trapped. He loved Sophonisba, but feared the wrath of Rome more. Realizing he could not save her from humiliation, he made a terrible choice. He sent a trusted servant to her with a cup of poison, telling her that it was the only way he could keep his promise to save her from the Romans. Sophonisba accepted her fate with regal dignity. She calmly drank the poison, stating she would have preferred a better wedding gift, but accepted this one as a final act of liberation from Roman hands. Her tragic story highlights the brutal political realities of the ancient world, where love and loyalty were often sacrificed at the altar of power and empire. Our final journey takes us east to the dazzling city of Palmyra in the Syrian desert. In the 3rd century AD, this oasis city stood at the crossroads of the Roman and Persian empires, a hub of wealth, culture, and trade. And at its head was one of the most ambitious women in history, Zenobia. Zenobia began her rise to power as the wife of Odaenathus, the ruler of Palmyra. While technically a Roman vassal, Odaenathus carved out a powerful kingdom for himself. After he successfully campaigned against the Sassanid Persians, the Roman Emperor Gallienus granted him the title Corrector of the whole East. He was the de facto king of the Roman East, and Zenobia was his queen. She was said to be a descendant of Cleopatra, fiercely intelligent, a skilled linguist, and a capable horsewoman who would march 4 miles with her troops. When Odaenathus and his eldest son were assassinated around 267 AD, Zenobia stepped into the power vacuum. She became regent for her young son Vabalethus, but there was no doubt who was truly in charge. Zenobia was not content to be a mere regent or a Roman client. She had grander ambitions. With the Roman Empire weakened by internal strife and barbarian invasions, she saw her chance. She began a stunning campaign of expansion. Her armies, led by the brilliant general Zabdas, conquered Egypt, a vital source of grain for Rome. They then swept through Anatolia, or modern-day Turkey, and the Levant. In just a few years, Zenobia had created a vast Palmyran empire that stretched from Egypt to Ankara. She declared her son emperor and took the title of Augusta, or Empress, for herself. It was a direct and audacious challenge to Roman authority. For a brief period, Zenobia ruled a third of the Roman Empire, but her meteoric rise attracted the attention of a formidable new Roman emperor, Aurelian, a career soldier determined to reunite the fractured empire. Aurelian turned his legions eastward in 272 AD. He swiftly reconquered Anatolia and met Zenobia's army at the Battle of Emae, near Antioch. The Palmyrines were defeated. Zenobia retreated to Emesa for a final stand, but was defeated again. She fled back to her capital, Palmyra, which Aurelian promptly besieged. Seeing that the city was doomed, Zenobia attempted a daring escape. Under the cover of darkness, she slipped out of the city on a swift camel, racing towards the Persian Empire to seek aid. But she was caught by Roman cavalry just as she was about to cross the Euphrates River. Her capture broke the spirit of Palmyra's defenders, and the city surrendered. Zenobia, the proud queen who had defied an empire, was now Aurelian's prisoner. Her fate is a matter of debate among historians. Some sources say she was paraded in golden chains during Aurelian's magnificent triumph in Rome. a spectacle meant to showcase the restoration of Roman power. Afterwards, these accounts claim she was given a villa in Tivoli, where she lived out her days as a Roman matron, her children marrying into the nobility. Other, more dramatic accounts say she starved herself to death out of shame or fell ill and died on the journey to Rome. Whatever her final end, Zenobia's story is a breathtaking saga of ambition and audacity. She dared to dream of an empire of her own, and for a glorious moment, she made it a reality. Boudica, Saphirnisba, and Zenobia, 3 queens from 3 different corners of the world, all of whom faced the might of empire. One fought with raw fury, another with political cunning, and the third with imperial ambition. Though they were ultimately captured and defeated, their stories were not erased. They stand as powerful testaments to the indomitable spirit of women who refused to be mere footnotes in a history written by their conquerors. They ruled, they fought, and they challenged the world's greatest power, leaving behind legacies that continue to inspire and fascinate us to this day. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey through history. If you enjoyed learning about these incredible queens, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of the powerful figures who shaped our world. Let us know in the comments which captured queen story you find most compelling. See you next time. What really happened to the queens Rome defeated? It wasn't just about losing a battle. It was about losing everything. Imagine a queen, revered by her people, suddenly captured. Even her name is erased, replaced by a cold, dehumanizing label. Enemy captive. This wasn't a private humiliation. It was a public spectacle. The captured queen was forced to march, sometimes for hundreds of miles, across the very land she once governed. The people who once bowed in respect now watched her pass, shackled and surrounded by Roman soldiers. Their faces showed a mix of pity, fear, and sometimes a chilling indifference. This long, grueling journey, known as the Via Dolorosa, or Sorrowful Way, was designed to break the spirit. For many, it succeeded. But for the Romans, this was just the overture to a much larger, more elaborate performance of power. This wasn't just a parade. It was the ultimate celebration of Roman military victory, a spectacle so grand that the entire city would shut down to witness it. The victorious general, the triumphator, would ride in a golden chariot, his face painted red to emulate the god Jupiter. His soldiers would march behind him, singing songs that both praised his victories and cheekily mocked his flaws. And at the head of this procession, for all of Rome to see, were the spoils of war, ebbs of gold, priceless artworks, exotic animals from conquered lands, and most importantly, the captured royals themselves. Forced to walk in chains, often barefoot, with children beside her. The contrast was deliberate and brutal. Here was a woman who once commanded armies, now reduced to a mere trophy. The Roman crowds would line the streets, jeering, throwing insults, and marveling at the sight of foreign royalty so utterly defeated. Think of Zenobia, the warrior, queen of Palmyra. After her defeat, she was paraded through Rome, allegedly bound in golden chains, so laden with jewels she could barely walk. The message was clear and undeniable. No matter how powerful you are, Rome is mightier. Male leaders, like Vercingetorix of the Gauls, were often publicly executed at the conclusion of the parade, typically by strangulation in the Tullianum. Rome's notorious state prison, this was the ultimate demonstration of Roman justice and finality. While some might have faced execution, it was more common for captured queens and their children to be spared. Their children could be raised and educated in Rome, becoming Romanized and potentially installed as loyal puppet rulers back in their homelands later on. After the humiliation of the triumph, a captured queen might be granted a villa in a pleasant part of Italy, far from the capital. She would be given an allowance from the Roman state, living in a state of comfortable house arrest. She wasn't free, but she wasn't in a dungeon either. Her life was now one of quiet obscurity. She could no longer influence politics or lead armies. Her days were spent in a luxurious prison, a constant reminder of all she had lost. Cleopatra Selene II, the daughter of the famous Cleopatra and Mark Antony, is a prime example. After her parents' defeat and death, she and her brothers were taken to Rome and paraded in Octavian's triumph. But she wasn't executed. Instead, she was raised in the household of Octavia, Octavian's own sister. However, this life of comfortable exile was a psychological prison. Imagine the constant internal conflict. These were women raised to rule, tasted ultimate power, now living at the mercy of their conquerors. They were surrounded by Roman culture, their children speaking Latin, their every move watched. They were ghosts of their former selves, living relics of a defeated past. It reinforced the idea that Roman rule brought order and stability, even to its enemies. From the stripping of royal garments, to the public shame of the triumph, and finally, to the quiet oblivion of a life in exile, every step was calculated to reinforce Roman supremacy. Her life, her children, and her legacy were no longer her own. They belonged to the empire. Their stories are a poignant and often overlooked chapter in the grand narrative of Rome, reminding us that the consequences of war extend far beyond the final battle, echoing through the lives of those who survive. Go and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into the hidden corners of history. See you next time.